your Tuesday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day. Hope you guys are having a good day out there. Really good show coming up. Randy Johnson from the Star Tribune joins me on a couple of different subjects. The main one being Gopher football. He, of course, covers the Gophers for the Star Tribune. He is down in the Atlanta area, spending some time with new Gophers quarterback Max Brosmer and a bunch of Max's teammates, getting a better sense of who Max is, what his leadership is like, things like that. So we'll talk Gopher football. We'll talk quarterbacks for sure. We'll also talk a little bit of arena football. Randy covered some stories over the weekend with the Minnesota Myth on the verge of folding at that point, and even on the verge of folding when we talked Monday afternoon, and then later on that day, indeed getting the word that the Myth are no longer after just 2 games. So Randy and I will talk about what led up to that, and then I'll get into a little bit more of the history of franchises here in Minnesota that didn't last too long. Lots of other stuff to get to, though. PWHL Minnesota wins its first playoff game. Get to that towards the end of the show. WNBA beginning now. Lynx open tonight in Seattle. Home opener later this week on Friday. Should have more Lynx stuff later this week. Hoping to get Kent Youngblood, Lynx writer, on the show later this week to talk more about their season ahead of that home opener. Twins Yankees starts today at Target Field. Lots of stuff, right? This is a time when lots of stuff is going on. First, though, what I miss, I'll start NBA. Watching a decent amount of and following Mavericks against Thunder last night. Everybody ready to crown Dallas in that series after they took games 2 and 3 in Oklahoma City. Dallas seemed to be in control of game 4 in Dallas. Mavs had, like a 6 to 8 point lead for a decent chunk of the early part of the fourth quarter. Not out of reach, but it seemed like they had the game under control. And then Oklahoma City chips away, gets back into it, ultimately wins 100-96. Mavs miss a bunch of free throws. Kyrie Irving didn't have a big scoring night, although he played okay. Luka Doncic missed a key free throw towards the end of the game. They could have tied the game late if he had made both of them. So they lose. That series is 2-2 now. Oklahoma City, the higher seed, the number 1 seed in the West, a young team, maybe arriving ahead of its time, but again, impressive in the opening round of the playoffs. They swept the Pelicans right out of the playoffs. They have a chance now to kind of regain that spot. I mean, I think people were taking Oklahoma City a little bit too lightly in these playoffs, but the bigger point I want to make about this is I feel like we are in a big hurry to declare things over or to declare things certain right now, right? Like this happened in the Oklahoma City-Dallas series. People are saying, okay, Dallas has taken a 2-1 lead. Okay, they look like they've got the veteran squad. They are going to take command of the series. Instead, now it is 2-2. People want it clean. People want it easy. That is not usually, especially being between evenly matched teams in an era where there's no real dynasty, I don't think, in the NBA. That is not how it works. It is not easy. Wolves-Denver. That brings me to Wolves-Denver Game 5 tonight in Denver, 9:30, probably more like a 9:40, could even be 9:50 tip-off. You're going to have to want it. So are the Wolves, but you're going to have to want it if you're going to watch it, because this one probably won't get over until around midnight. People wanted the series to be over after the 2 games in Denver, right? The Wolves won those 2 in Denver, including Game 2, that 26-point blowout. Nuggets come into Game 3. You're wondering, did they break their spirit? Did the Wolves just unlock something where Denver is like, we can't beat this team anymore? I never thought that was going to be the case. I thought Denver was going to give them their best game in Game 3. Denver comes out and routs the Wolves in Game 3. So they're like, okay, now we got a series. What's going to happen in Game 4? Can the Wolves still maintain? Can they, take control again of this series, go up 3-1, have that commanding lead? No, they could not. Denver won the 4th game as well in Minneapolis on Sunday. So here we are. 2 games apiece, about where you might have thought this series would be after 4 games, albeit a strange way to get there. Here's the thing, though. Like I said, people wanted this to be easy, whether it was just, because they didn't want the drama, because they thought that the Wolves looked good enough to sweep this. You had the national narrative. You had Charles Barkley, everybody saying, hey, this thing is over, Wolves in 4. I don't know if it's false confidence, if it's not wanting to believe that this thing could get tense again. These things are generally not easy. These things are hard. Minnesota sports can be hard, but this second point on this is not some sort of Minnesota sports curse rearing its ugly head. They were not cursed in either of those 2 losses. They lost to a team that was the defending champs, won the championship last year. Nikola Jokic is a 3-time now MVP of the league, a player unlike anybody we've ever seen. This was going to be hard, no matter what. I don't think you could have expected, even after those 2 games, that the series would play out just like that. It was not going to be easy like that. Denver was not going to just lay down, and let the Wolves, roll right through these playoffs into the Western Conference Finals against either Dallas or Oklahoma City. So now what happens? Now that it's hard? Now that it's kind of back to square one? It's a best of 3. Denver has the home court with 2 of those last 3 games, 5, and if necessary, game 7 back in Denver. What will they do now that we know for sure that it is not easy? This is where you find out what kind of team you have. This is where you find out if you have a team that is worth keeping together. This is where you find out if you are a true contender or if you still have another step or 2 in the process. That is what we are going to learn tonight, and it was never going to be easy. That will be on display. I expect Denver's best game. I don't know what kind of game Minnesota is going to bring. I think we've seen enough of the Wolves this year to think they are going to be resilient, that they are going to play well, but we are still learning more about the Wolves than we have to learn about Denver. We already knew, I think, or at least we should have known, that they were going to give the Wolves all they could handle in Minnesota, that they were not just going to go away quietly. Now what happens? Now that we know for sure, this is not easy. If you want to do some basketball channel surfing and you still have access to Bally Sports North, which is increasingly rare these days, Lynx open at 9 p.m. A couple of late basketball games. Lynx open their season 9 p.m. at Seattle. A couple of interesting things written in the last few days by Kent Youngblood. One, just talking about the growth of the league. Some of it, the Caitlin Clark effect with sellouts and a lot of huge crowds expected for her games. When Indiana comes to play at Target Center, they've expanded the seating to the upper bowl at Target Center. They're moving some things around at other places, but charter flights coming to the WNBA, revenues up across the board, projections being beaten right now for the league, expansion on the horizon in the next few years to 14 teams. The league is growing. The league is getting bigger, going to be more players into this league. Where do the Lynx kind of carve out that next kind of 5-year plan? How do they get, not just from the middle of the pack, which they've kind of been for the last 5 years, 6 years, ever since their last championship in 2017. How do they go from there to being one of the best again? Well, they're going to start this year building around Nafisa Collier and a new identity built more around defense, an interesting kind of identity for this team. If you think back to, again, their dynasty run of the 2010s, they were, they could play both ways, but they were definitely more of an offensive-minded team than a defensive-minded team. They were they were a team that could outscore you. They were a team that had, dynamic Hall of Fame scorers, Maya Moore, Simone Augustus, of course, Sylvia Fowles toward the end of her career, although she was certainly great on defense as well. Lindsay Whalen, her calling card was more offense than defense. Of course, they could get stops when they needed to, but right now, this team looking to build its identity around defense. That will be an interesting thing to watch. Starts, like I said, 9 p.m. tonight against Seattle. Seattle will be back here on Friday for the home opener at Target Center, and we will see where this season goes. Now, Twins-Yankees. Twins 17-3 in their last 20 games. An amazing 20-game stretch after the 7-13 mark in their first 20 games. A complete turnaround. And like we talked about a few other times, if we were waiting to see if they were going to be good against some of these better teams, they have fared quite well against some of these better teams. Boston comes in, they handle Boston. Seattle comes in, they handle Seattle. They go to Toronto, they handle Toronto. But the Yankees, no matter what their record is, and the record is usually pretty good, whatever the record is, the Yankees are always a measuring stick team for the Twins. This year should be no different. Yankees 27-15, tied for first in the AL East. Twins 24-16, a game behind the Cleveland Guardians right now in the AL Central. Remember, like a few weeks ago, before this big 17-3 stretch started, Twins were like 8-9 games back already. You're wondering, is the season going to be over before it starts? It is certainly not over before it starts. They will get an opportunity to measure themselves again against the Yankees. We were talking about the competition getting better in May. The Twins have handled that beautifully so far. But like we said, the Yankees are an entirely different animal and a new way to see where this team stands in 2024.
Open a 5.15% annual percentage yield 9-month certificate from Royal Credit Union. Open now at rcu.org/certificate515. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 4/26/24. Insured by NCUA.
Good to be joined today by Randy Johnson. Primarily covers Gopher football for the Star Tribune. Randy, how you doing?
Very good, Mike.
Spending a little time, as of even right now, in the Georgia, South Carolina area. I want to pick your brain a little bit. Gophers off season. This is a big one, and one of the centerpieces of this off season was bringing in transfer quarterback Max Brosmer. Starred at the FCS level at New Hampshire. You've been down kind of visiting with him and some of these other Gopher players who are doing a lot of off season work with him. What's kind of the takeaway from that? You'll be writing about it a little bit later on, in the spring here. But what's the sense you get from him and how much they're counting on him and kind of what this group is trying to put together?
Yeah, it's what I get from him. It's like he's a really a take charge guy, very organized. Max is from Roswell, Georgia, and his parents have a lake home in right across the border on Lake Hartwell in South Carolina. So Max organized a group of his teammates, basically 11 of them coming out here, the wide receivers, running back, and some tight ends, basically for a week of bonding and a week of some workouts. So yesterday they were out at the lake. They were coming back to the Atlanta area, the Roswell area today for some workouts, and they're going to be going to a Braves game on Tuesday. So, yeah, it's, a mix of things. But I think it's, Max this is the only year with the Gophers, a grad transfer, basically putting his stamp on the program, putting his leadership experience to value for that team. It's he's going to be the one driving the bus. And
rowing the boat. I think we ought to. It's a boat, not a bus. It's a boat, not a bus. But yes,
he was actually he was driving the pontoon yesterday as they
no oars needed, no paddles needed, but still,
yeah,
yes.
But no, so it's a chance for him to, just I think it's important too to get to know these teammates even better. I mean, it's pretty interesting. You bring a guy in and he's he doesn't know anybody, and quickly he's voted team captain. So so he's definitely hit the ground running, and I'm sure this helps. He earlier this season, this spring, he had some guys down there, some of his teammates down there during spring break. Okay. And he's done this, did it last year also with his New Hampshire teammates. So it's a very organized kid, or young man, I should say.
Well, and this seems like, he's 23 right now. This is certainly a more veteran college quarterback, kind of like what the Gophers had in, by the end of the Tanner Morgan era, when Tanner Morgan had been here for 5 years, 6 years, I think, maybe at a certain point. Last year, obviously, the transition to Ethan Kaliakmanis, that doesn't go as well. Not saying it's because he's younger or less experienced or that he's any less of a leader, but I imagine this is some of what PJ Fleck envisioned, in addition to being able to maybe make different throws or have different touch on the ball, that he envisioned when he brings in a guy like Brosmer, like a little bit more of that kind of older presence, which you sometimes need to have at quarterback, in addition to the arm talent.
Yeah, it's really shown. But yeah, PJ definitely wanted a more experienced quarterback, somebody who's been through a lot more than Ethan had. You could really tell it after the season finale against Wisconsin. The Badgers had Tanner Mordecai, a SMU transfer who was a senior, and basically, he was a very efficient quarterback, and I believe that's PJ saw that and it's like, hey, we need one of those. We need somebody who can come in here and take control of the team, and I think that's definitely what they hope they're getting out of Max Brosmer, and we'll see this fall, but indications are that he's definitely got the command of the team.
At the same time, they have this quarterback from Arkansas who I would imagine they hope is a multiple year starter at some point, kind of the more traditional way to build up a quarterback. But you got to be adept. You got to be able to do kind of either way in this era, right?
Yeah, definitely. Drake Lindsay, you're talking about from
Yes.
Fayetteville, Arkansas. He's an early enrollee freshman, and he's been quite impressive during spring ball. So they have to like that. He's learning from Max Brosmer. Yeah, he's a guy that they think he's a pretty much a quick study. So that should help some things this season.
They had a pretty productive off season in the portal, it seemed to me, and I think some of that's just the era we're in. Some of it though probably amounts to a little bit of urgency and understanding the moment in terms of both, hey, going 5-7 and still getting that bowl win, getting to 6 wins there, and just kind of the new era we're in. Do you feel like this is kind of a transition point where they've kind of hit the portal in a way that they hadn't before, and they're kind of reshaping maybe even how they think about how to build a program at this point?
Yeah, I think experience is the key there. Last year they probably didn't do nearly as well as they have this year in the portal, and it helps when you bring a guy in like Jackson Howard,
Yes.
the top-rated player in Minnesota last year, who ended up at LSU and then decided to come back home. That should be an immense help. They seem to have targeted certain areas and went after guys they wanted and got them. It's that they added quite a bit of depth at running back, and as we've seen over the years, you can never have enough of those guys.
Yes.
They're obviously with Max Brosmer, they targeted quarterback, got that. They had one guy that they thought were bringing from a backup from Fresno State. He committed, then left. Now late in the portal window in the spring, they run in Dylan Whitkey from Virginia Tech. So there's a little more depth at quarterback then. So I think they've navigated that end of the roster development better this year with the portal additions.
Should there be different expectations then for next year? I mean, obviously it's going to be it's wide open. I mean, all these new teams are coming in. It's going to be we've talked about the schedule and how daunting that can be. But at this point, as we sit here in mid-May, how do you think we kind of assess where they can get to, what their internal versus external expectations are?
Yeah, it's the schedule is tough. So it's you no longer have the Big Ten West to kind of lean on, and
right.
You might have been one win better at times with that schedule. Now it's going to be quite a bit tougher. Expectations. Maybe you have a season where you say you had an 8-4 season. Maybe it's adjusted to a 7-5. We'll see. I mean, they're not picked very highly in most of the preseason, off-season prediction magazines or websites. I think maybe that's a good amount of doom and gloom ending from last season.
Yeah.
I think with what they've done in the portal, I think they will be a bit better than that. Is it going to make the difference? Is it going to be a 9-win season? Regular season? Probably not. I mean, they'd really have to hit their stride pretty good. But it's I don't see it being another 5-7. Could be wrong, but I think they'll be better than that.
Couple more thoughts on the Gophers, then I want to pick your brain on the Arena League, which you wrote about over the weekend, and the Minnesota franchise, which, as of recording at least, is still a franchise. The Gophers last year, it's easy to forget based on how the season ended, but at a certain point, they controlled their own destiny, right, in the Big Ten West at like the halfway point or so, and then you looked at their schedule and you're like, okay, they got work to do, but even if you saw certain things breaking the right way, they could have been a factor in the Big Ten West race. So it's easy to forget that season kind of like got away from them, but it wasn't until kind of late that it got away from them. How do you think they kind of self-scouted how that season ended? Do you feel like they thought, hey, this was just, a matter of it was the quarterback, or it was injuries, or they just weren't as good as they thought? How do you think the self-scout came out of the end of last year?
I think they looked at their weaknesses and tried to do what they could to shore them up. Particularly at quarterback. They believe they've done that. The linebacker situation was tough because of the injuries. They're hoping for a much better luck in that department. That can be concerning when I mean they'll look for development from what they had that last year with all the young guys that they did play. So that should make that situation better, and especially if Cody Lindenberg stays healthy. He is a very good linebacker, and if you can keep him in that lineup, that's a much better position group. I believe they've addressed their needs. They've seen the weaknesses and put in a plan to make to improve those areas.
I see Calic Manis has won the starting job, at least for now, at Rutgers. Should we be circling that game in 2024 on the calendar? That could be kind of fun, right?
Rutgers is proven that they're a program that's been on the rise. That'll be an interesting game if he's starting. It's got quite the subplot there.
And then Rossi's over there too now, right? So that's like his.
No,
not Rossi. I'm sorry, not Rossi. Who am I thinking of? The offensive coordinator, not Rossi.
Oh, Shiraka, yeah.
Shiraka. Geez, what am I talking about? Sorry. Yeah, Shiraka's over there now too. So you've got that whole kind of subplot as well. So it could be a fun season. We'll see where it's headed. We still got months to go before they get going. But I'm glad you're down there writing about the quarterback. We can never write too much about the quarterbacks, right? We can never do too much on the quarterbacks.
We learned that very well from Mr. Glenn Crevier. Former
quarterbacks. So you wrote over the weekend about some difficulties that the new Minnesota Arena League team is having, the Minnesota Myth. They've played 2 games, but then they couldn't get to Albany because they couldn't. The travel didn't work. I'm not exactly sure how we characterize that. What's your take on this?
Yeah. And so they opened the season on the road in Nashville. Yeah. Got spanked 47-12. They come back for their home opener, beat what was called the Philadelphia Soul, but it was basically a kind of a ragtag group of former from like a minor arena league.
Okay.
The original Philadelphia Soul players basically weren't available because they got kicked out of their hotel in suburban Philly because the team hadn't paid the bills. They went with this other group. It's been a mess. But the Myth won their second game. Same score, 47-12.
Unusual.
They were scheduled to. Well, originally they were scheduled to play Saturday at home, but then at Target Center, but with the Wolves in town. Right. So the game was rescheduled for Albany, New York, and against the Albany Firebirds on Monday. Well, on Friday, Ricky Foggy, the coach of the Myth, the former
Gopher
quarterback under Lou Holtz, and the former Fighting Pike quarterback.
Yes, that's right.
Previous Arena Football League in Minnesota team. Yeah, he resigned, and another one of their assistants resigned. Basically, talking to sources, it's the team and players weren't getting, or the coaches and players weren't getting paid. So basically, they couldn't make the trip to Albany for today's game. So we'll see what's happened. The Arena League is it's on some very, very shaky footing. The 2 teams have already folded. A third, the Philadelphia team, they've canceled the rest of their season. They hope to come back next year. The Rapid City Marshals on Saturday, players wouldn't take the field after pregame stuff, so evidently they drew their line in the sand. The league was originally supposed to have a good number of their games on the NFL Network, but then the production company didn't get paid, and that contract was canceled. So it's not going well for the league right now.
Well, and this is kind of reminiscent. I mean, the Fighting Pike, for all we like talk about them and remember them, they were only around for one season. Like the Arena
Yeah, they
League
were
had
only around in that one season in '96. The one thing about that time, there was a lot more promotion
yes. I went to one of those games. I was in college then. I remember that. Like that was like right in my wheelhouse. Target Center, go have a good time. But that was yeah, there was a lot of fans at the game, at least that I remember going to, but they only lasted a year. And the league though at that point was a lot more stable. Like they had a
yes,
really
yeah,
good like decades long run where it felt like they had at least like carved out a niche in these kind of like secondary markets.
yeah. So this league has been dormant for what was it 8, 10 years or whatever now after going through bankruptcy, and then so they decided to give it a shot again this with new ownership, and it's not working very well. It was kind of interesting that the Miss season opener at Nashville, there was a decent crowd there. It looked
Okay.
like there were probably 5,000 at the municipal auditorium there, and I guess that's one of the cities that has done well hosting arena football league. So it was they have probably a bit better base than say a
Okay.
Minnesota did or some of these other ones. They've ended up putting teams in a lot smaller markets than they probably originally hoped for. Like the state of Kansas has 3 teams in there, which in smaller cities like your Wichita's, things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm curious too. Is it now with that UFL starting
Right.
spring outdoor league, has that caused a little bit of issue with the arena league, or is there just not enough interest in it?
Well, and I love minor league sports. I love like these smaller leagues. They're fun if you can
Yeah,
get it to work. But this just kind of reminds me just of like I just feel like we haven't had a team like this for a while that's just like operating on a shoestring. But this is how all the like fledgling professional leagues like there's stories like this from like the NBA in like the 60s,
sure.
50s, 60s,
Oh
70s,
yeah,
like teams starting up, folding, moving in the middle of the season, players not getting paid. Like we forget in this era of like massive TV contracts and these leagues that are kind of set for life with all these like billion-dollar TV deals like these the leagues kind of like the Arena League now used to be almost wholly dependent on what you did at the gate. I mean, if you didn't
yeah,
draw fans, you couldn't exist.
yeah. And what makes that what you see the leagues like this having trouble. What makes the St. Paul Saints even more remarkable is that the fact that they go as an independent team originally.
Right.
They built up what they did, and to the point where they end up selling and becoming a Twins
Yes.
Triple A franchise
Yes. It
in a
takes
beautiful stadium in downtown St. Paul.
it takes a pretty remarkable kind of set of circumstances to make that happen. And, for a while here, it was, hey, they have outdoor baseball, the games are fun, things like that. But yeah, to build up that fan base and to keep it going for so many years before, like you said, becoming a Twins affiliate a handful of years ago, that is a good point. Well, we'll see where this goes this week and beyond. Randy Johnson, appreciate it. Look for that story on all those Gopher players down with Max Brosmer. That'll be coming out probably sometime that's later this month, I would imagine.
Yeah, I believe so. It could possibly be the Memorial Day weekend.
Okay.
We'll see. I have some work to do when I get back,
Yes.
back
I'm
to the
sure.
city and some writing to do. But no, it's
Yeah.
been interesting, chatting with everybody.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks, Randy. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot, Mike.
Royal Credit Union's smart checking accounts offer no monthly fees and no minimum balance. Enjoy financial freedom when you open your Royal Credit Union smart checking account online at rcu.org/go checking. Insured by NCUA.
Great stuff from Randy. And like I said at the beginning of the show, when Randy and I recorded, the future for the Minnesota Myth was tenuous at best. And in the hours after we recorded, of course, coming to find out that players have been notified that the season will be prematurely cut short. The franchise lasts just 2 games. All sorts of issues with funding, things like that. The league seems to be on shaky footing in general right now. It's not just the Myth that are having problems right now getting themselves together. It is a reminder of how hard it is to do this in kind of on the fringes without a major league, without TV contracts. The Arena League was trying to get TV things together. They didn't get it together. It is a reminder of how these teams operate. They need to basically draw fans to sell merchandise, to do it kind of the way it used to be done before TV was such a huge deal. Looking through the list, the Myth join a long and illustrious list of now defunct Minnesota teams. I was just looking at all of these teams. Of course, the Fighting Pike, the one year they played the Arena League in the mid-90s, 1996. And of course, Ricky Foggy, the coach of the Myth, who quit just a few days ago ahead of this. He was the quarterback for that team. But they aren't the only ones. Just looking through this long list of teams that used to be here, there's teams that were in the Indoor Football League, the Bemidji Axemen, Duluth Superior Lumberjacks, things like that. You had other teams in this wheelhouse, the Minnesota Blue Ox, like Randy and I talked about, the roller hockey team, the Minnesota Ripneys. I don't know if you guys remember that. I remember that. They started up in their mid-2000s, played a couple years in the new ABA, the new Basketball Association. You had the indoor soccer, outdoor soccer, the Kicks, the Strikers. You had, the Fighting Pike, like I said. You had just all these teams that have come and gone. The Swarm, I think the Swarm's still going strong. The indoor lacrosse, they're still functioning, but I think they're in Georgia now. All of these teams, the Minnesota Moose, that are just kind of right on the tip of our tongue, part of this lexicon. All of these teams that rely so heavily on getting people through the door, getting people to know about this team, building a fan base, as opposed to now the major leagues that are so heavily dependent on TV contracts, things like that. It's fascinating to me to see what teams make it, what teams don't, how long these leagues have staying power. Can't really remember, though, a team that was so short-lived as the Myth. 2 games and done. 1-1 will be their final record. Unless something weird happens and they come back, 1-1 is their final record. That brings me to the cooler and a league that looks like it has far more staying power and a much better plan, the PWHL Women's Hockey League. 6 teams, a 10-year financial commitment, TV contracts in place when they came in. The thing they had going for them besides that is they're the top league, right? They're a top league. They're not trying to be like a secondary league like all these football leagues that pop up or other leagues that pop up that try to compete in a space where there's already a much better league established. These are the best of the best players right now playing in this league. Minnesota gets its first playoff win. They were on the ropes. The regular season finished terribly. They lost 5 in a row to finish the regular season. Squeaked into the playoffs on the last day with some help. Lost their first 2 playoff games in Toronto via shutout. You're like, are they just going to finish the year with 8 losses in a row? No, they win 2-0 at XL Energy Center on Monday. Get that series back to 2-1. A home game again tomorrow to try to draw even in this best-of-5 series. Announced crowd of a little over 3,000. Maddie Rooney has a shutout. They get 2 goals. They finally get on the board in the playoffs. So the Minnesota's PWHL team, a league that unlike some of these others seems to have a great amount of staying power, gets a playoff win, gets itself on the board. So good for them, and even better for them that the health of this league seems to be long-term and not short-term. That will do it for me today. Expecting to have Chip Scoggins on tomorrow's show to talk Wolves. He is planning to stay up late as I am to watch that game. I think we're going to record something right after the game ends. If there's some drama, if it's a game that warrants it, we might do it as a bonus special episode, then have a separate other episode tomorrow to talk about all these other things that are happening, Lynx, Twins, Yankees, things like that. We will play that by ear. We will see if this is the game that we think it will be or not. But either way, Chip and I are expecting to bring you a show for Wednesday talking about the Wolves. Until then, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Get your caffeine going. It's going to be a late night. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.